Alrighty, so today we're going to talk about expansion. And after last week, it was announced that San Diego will be the latest MLS team coming into the league and becoming the 30th MLS team coming into the league starting in the 2025 season. I thought this would be a perfect time for me to reignite that discussion of which exactly is going to be the next city that is going to be coming into MLS and becoming the latest expansion team. Because as much as I know, there's been talks of the fact that the league might stop at 30 teams. No, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, Don Gabber have even said that he's open to have 31 or 32 team, and there could be a chance where we could get as much as 40 teams, as what I heard a couple of years that Peter Vermees have said that there could be a possibility in 10 years' time we could get 40 teams, and then we could get to the discussion of, well, how is the format going to look? Are we going to still stick with just two conference, or are we going to go with division, or as some of the people have been kind of banging the drum about promotion and relegation, that could be a possibility too. But today, I'm not going to discuss that. I'm just simply talking about which exactly is the next city that is going to get an MLS team in the near future. And you notice I also included Canadian cities because I know there hasn't been a Canadian city that has expanded into MLS since 2012, and I know the Canadian Premier League kind of have killed that. There is definitely a potential that it still could happen. And again, it's you never say never in terms of MLS expansion. People said that this league would stop expanding a couple years ago, and it is still expanding. And I have a feeling we could get to a point that, like I said earlier, we could get to 40 teams in the next decade or two. And also, you notice I'm wearing St. Louis because they are the latest team to come into the league just this season. So perfect time for me to kind of talk about expansion when I'm wearing a jersey of an expansion team this season. But let's start with number one. And keep in mind, this is not actually a rankings of the most likely team, even though technically I probably should have changed the title there. These are just kind of cities that I think that could be the next expansion team in MLS. So if I had to do rankings, I would definitely put this city at number one. And that, of course, is Las Vegas. So, Vegas, of course, this was supposed to be the team that was the 30th MLS team in the league. I mean, Don Gabbard had kind of mentioned it before that most likely Las Vegas is going to be that. But obviously, we know that of course, isn't the case because San Diego leapfrogged them. Now, obviously, I still know that there is definitely a high possibility. I mean, I would say that it's not if Las Vegas is going to come to the league, but when exactly Las Vegas has come to the league, because the league have mentioned many times before that they are going to have a team in Las Vegas, and especially when you look at the Vegas sports landscape. I mean, the boom all started when the NHL decided to award Vegas a team and award the Vegas Golden Knights, and then you saw the Raiders, of course, relocated from Oakland, and now it seems like that's going to be the same case in the MLB with the A's going to Las Vegas too. So MLS is trying to capitalize on that, and especially after having the Gold Cup final at Allegiant Stadium and also having the League Cup final a couple years back, you know that MLS wants to tap into this market, and that again, I think the reason why they haven't become an MLS team is that I've heard rumors that they've been having issue with the ownership and also with the stadium thing. But once they solve that, I'm pretty sure MLS is going to announce that Vegas is going to be the next expansion team. Again, I would be shocked if Vegas doesn't announce as the next expansion team in MLS in the next 5 years because it is pretty clear that the league they really want Vegas to come into the league, and it's and time soon once they sort out the ownership and the stadium thing that they're going to announce that Vegas could become the 31st MLS team. Then we get to number two, and we're going to go with Phoenix. Now, obviously, if Vegas does announce to become the next MLS team, most likely I don't think Phoenix is going to be the 32nd because, again, when you also look at expansion, you got to also look at the conferences. So with San Diego coming into the league, I believe that's now balanced the conference a little bit even at 50 teams and or 15 teams, and that the league want to try to make sure that each conference have the same amount of team. Though if they do decided to announce a two Western team and add it in the Western Conference, we could see some conference alignment. We could see teams that might be in the Western Conference that could be moved to the Eastern Conference. And again, we won't talk a lot about that because that could be an interesting discussion to talk about in the near future. But yeah, Phoenix is definitely another cities that it's been on the minds of MLS, and Don Gabbert mentioned many times that Phoenix could get a team. Again, Phoenix I think is kind of in the same issue with Vegas, where the stadium issue. There's been a disagreement whether are they going to put a retractable roof, or are they going to put a fixed roof. I mean, it's pretty obvious that they can't just do what the Phoenix Rising does. I mean, I'm kind of shocked the fact that the USL team are playing in a stadium that is open air. Like it's like 100 degrees in the summer, and I know they mostly play night games, but that's insane that that is the case. And I know MLS is not going to do that, but obviously, again, the Phoenix market, that the Rising has been one of the team that is the most heavily support in MLS, and it's definitely a market that do love soccer, and that the league really wants to tap into. But like I said about Vegas, they need to sort out the stadium issue and ownership. And I think that's going to be something I'm going to repeat a lot throughout this video, because a lot of these teams kind of have some same issue of why exactly MLS don't want to award the team. And especially with a lot of these expansion teams or a lot of these city that could become an expansion team, the expansion fee is going to be really expensive. Like I think we're going to get to a point where if we do get into like the 33rd, 34th, we could see the expansion fee to be at the across the $1 billion mark, with the recent expansion fee have already reached half a billion. Then we go to number three, and we're gonna go with Indianapolis. So for Indy, I think there is a case that Indy could be an expansion team, especially again, this is where I go back to talk about where MLS, as much as there has been some West Coast teams that have been interest of coming into MLS and could likely be in the league. We also talk about teams that is in the East, and that Indy is probably the most likely team that if the league decided to add another Eastern Conference team, it's going to be them. Because what's interesting about Indianapolis is that they do actually have a stadium set and done. They're planning to build that 20,000 seat stadium as part of an entertainment kind of areas. And obviously, once they do build that, they're going to house the current Indy 11 USL Championship team. And keep in mind, Indy 11 is also one of the more well attended team in the USL Championship. So again, the it seems like there is definitely a soccer culture in Indy, which is something that you didn't think that that was going to be the case maybe a decade ago. But again, we'll see whether or not if they have the ownership enough to fork out that expansion fee. Because I think the one good thing that Indy has with between Phoenix and Vegas is that at least they have kind of sorted out the stadium thing. And once they do build that, I think the league, it depends on if they have the right ownership. The league might be thinking about adding Indy, especially if they do add a Western Conference team. They would be tempted to add an Eastern Conference team too, so that they can balance the conference between both of it right now in MLS. Then we go to number four, and this is another East team, and this might not be the case. Um, but I'm still gonna throw in Detroit into it, and the reason why I say it might not be the case is because Detroit. I know a couple of years ago when I made a video talking about the four likeliest team that could potentially come to MLS, and that I think MLS have even mentioned that they have like a kind of almost like a little tournament in terms of expansion teams, and that when we get to like the final four and the four most likely candidate that is going to be the next team to award an MLS team, Detroit is one of those one. Now the issue with Detroit is that they were originally thinking about playing at Ford Field as the stadium that they're going to use for the MLS team, and MLS just straight out said no, because Fort Field, they don't want a situation similar to other teams of playing on turf and sharing an NFL team to do so. And also the ownership group was a problem for Detroit too. And also, the fan culture. I know the fan culture is definitely there with Detroit. I mean, Detroit City is definitely one of the more well-known fan-owned club, and a team that have that fan culture, that have repeatedly said that they don't want MLS. They want to revolt MLS. They don't want to come into the league. They want to stay where they are. So it kind of gets a little bit complicated in terms of the situation. I mean, imagine if Detroit is going to get a team. I have a feeling it's not going to be Detroit City going to be the team that's going to come to MLS. I think this is going to be similar to the situation we have with San Diego right now, where many people thought that San Diego Loyals was that team that is going to be inherited into MLS, but this is a complete different group from the San Diego Loyals. So yeah, I think that's something that it's kind of an awkward situation right now with San Diego, and I think this is kind of the same thing that the league maybe want to try to avoid with Detroit because there's no doubt that I don't think Detroit City is gonna be that team that's gonna come to MLS. It's gonna be a different ownership group. Detroit City, their fans wants to stay in where they are right now. But again, it's definitely a city that's been mentioned a couple of times that could get an MLS team. I mean, as long as they get the stadium situation figure it out, there could be a likely chance that if we do see an Eastern Conference team besides Indy, Detroit might be that team. Then we go to number five. Speaking of a team that have fans that don't really want to come to MLS anymore, that of course is Sacramento. So I mean, this shouldn't be a big surprise. Like when you click on this video, I think besides Vegas and Phoenix, you probably might think that Sacramento was going to be the city I mentioned, but yeah, that of course is the case of me mentioning them again, and I'm not going to go with talking about the situation with Sacramento. I mean, you probably have already heard it from me multiple times and how sad it is the fact that just a couple of years ago it was announced that they were going to be the 30th MLS team, and then Ron Burko and the investor kind of pull a fast one on them, and next thing you know, they're kind of in a limbo in terms of it, and it feels like it's another example of the league decided to pass on Sacramento, which is kind of the thing that started out now really pissed off the fans to a point where they don't want to come to MLS anymore. I mean, if you talk to any Republic fan, I would say that they're happy of where they are right now. They don't want to come to MLS, and I wouldn't blame them. Consider why would you come to a league that has repeatedly decided to kind of backstab you to a point where I think after what we saw a couple of years ago, where they come to MLS and then MLS decided to pull them out because of the whole situation with their ownership group decided to pull out on the deal. That was kind of the last straw where Sacramento is the fans don't want to come to MLS. So I mean, it does create an interesting situation. I mean, do the league decided to come back to it? I mean, I still think that my hope is eventually Sacramento is going to get a team, and that what we saw a couple of years ago was just so unfortunate, and that uh I feel like if they eventually does get the right ownership group, the league will eventually award it because after all, they've already have a stadium that is figured out, albeit they kind of downgrade the stadium that they had in the downtown railroad yard area. But again, I feel like the league is going to think about ma- making Sacramento a team. But the question is that when they eventually do have that announcement, would the fans actually accept it? Again, this is the same thing I'll say about the Detroit situation, but only with this one, I don't think it's going to be a separate ownership group, unless it could be. I mean, it could be a separate ownership group that leads a Sacramento team that has nothing to do with the Sacramento Republic, and then they come to MLS, and then that's gonna again creates even more of an awkward situation with the fact that we decided to award a team in Sacramento, but it's nothing going to be related to the Republic. It's just going to be another investor that's going to be coming into Sacramento, and that they're going to be separate from it. And I doubt that fans from the Sacramento area is going to support that team because again, most of the fans they love the Republic, and that's been kind of the dream that they've been wanted to eventually see the day where finally they can. It is going to happen where they're going to be playing MLS game in the near future. Now, number six, I'm going to say it's going to be Tampa. Now, Tampa is interesting because we did had a Tampa team in the league. Back in the early days of MLS, we had the Tampa Bay Mutiny coming into the league, and obviously they folded because of financial difficulty. I mean, to be fair, both Florida team kind of folded because of financial difficulty with the Miami Fusion also go down. But there could be a chance that we could see Tampa returning, especially with the way that Miami, of course, got their team back thanks to the David Beckham kind of invest group. We could see something similar with Tampa, and especially the Tampa Bay Rowdies is definitely a team that I wonder if the league decided to expand to Tampa. Will the Rowdies be that team to do so? And I really hope it will be because the Rowdies, you talk about a team that has a lot of history in American soccer. The Rowdies has had a lot of history. This is a team that was one of the original teams that play in the NASL, and I'm talking about the original NASL back in the 70s and in the 80s before it folded. that was there. And even though they're not kind of the same team, it's kind of still is with the same name and the same jerseys that they where that they're now playing in the USL Championship and have been one of the more successful USL Championship team in recent years. So I could see that the league might think about expanding to Tampa, and especially with the way that the league tends to love to expand to Southeastern team. Like we have seen a lot of expansion lately that has been gone into the Southeastern market. We saw Charlotte come into it. We saw Nashville coming into it. We saw Miami coming into it. That southeastern market is starting to become a hotbed of soccer. That I think it kind of all started when Atlanta came into the league back in 2017, and I have a feeling that Tampa could be that team that could come into the league. I mean, I know some will say that free Florida team seems like it a lot. No, it isn't. I don't think it is. I think it is viable to have a free Florida team, and especially I want to see kind of like a situation that we see in Texas and also and California and even in the Cascadia region, where we might see kind of like a cup where if Tampa does come into the league, we might have like a Florida Cup between them and Orlando City and Inter Miami. So yeah, I think knowing the fact that the league loves to expand to Southeastern market, don't be surprised Tampa might be one of those teams that could come into the league. Then we get to number 7. Now this is kind of gets to where it becomes a little bit of a wild card, and that of course is talking about Louisville coming into the league. Now, obviously, the thing about Louisville that maybe is the reason why they're not going to come into the league is that that's just a really small city and a city that doesn't have any professional team in the area. But we said the same thing about Austin, and yeah, look at how that of course went out, and especially with the way that Louisville is another team that has had really good attendance. In fact, they're one of the highest attendance team in the USL Championship, and pretty much has been the most successful USL Championship side in the past couple of years too. They've been dominating the Eastern Conference left and right. And not to mention, they also have probably the most beautiful stadium that we have in the USL Championship, a stadium that looks very similar to PayPal Park and a stadium that I'm pretty sure that is going to be the stadium that could host MLS game if Louisville does decide to come into the league. So with the way that they've already kind of got the stadium thing sorted out, and if they have an ambitious ownership group that decided that hey, why not put Louisville be one of the team to do so, I think the league could look into it. And again, this also goes back to what I said about the southeastern market. I mentioned about Tampa coming into the league. Louisville could be a viable part, and especially, can you imagine if they have a good rivalry between Cincinnati and also Nashville in terms of that? I mean, the league would definitely love that. So as much as I know, it could be unlikely because of the way that it is a very small market, and it will be the smallest market if Louisville does come into the league. There could be a good chance that in the near future, maybe as we get into like the 37 or 38 team, there could be a chance that maybe the league might be looking into Louisville after they award some of the more likely teams that is going to be coming into the league in the near future. Then we get to number 8, and this is the same situation I said about Louisville, where New Mexico could be a team that I could see a team, and that we could see a team in the Albuquerque area, and this has been kind of thrown around ever since New Mexico United came into the league, and that they have been a relatively well, I wouldn't say successful team, but still one of the more well attended team in the USL Championship. Now, the issue with New Mexico United is that, like some of these USL Championship teams that is desperate to trying to find a new stadium, and still currently playing at a baseball field. That's kind of the same case with New Mexico United. They're also desperately trying to find themselves a new stadium so that they don't play at Isotope Park, even though Isotope Park is not a bad baseball stadium. I mean, we're getting to a point where we start to see in the USL Championship where teams are actually building their own soccer specific stadium and not playing at a baseball field as we've seen maybe about 5 or 10 years ago. So that's kind of the thing that will drag down New Mexico United compared to another small market that comes to the team. But yeah, again, the market is definitely there, and that if in case Phoenix does come into the league, there could be a good rivalry between New Mexico and Phoenix if that could be a near future. But again, talk about the more unlikely ones. New Mexico could be be that, even though there's been whisper that they could potentially be a team that, again, just like what I said about Louisville, once we get to the 37, 38, 8 team, along with Louisville potentially coming to the league, New Mexico might be more possibility that they could come into the league too. Then we get to number nine, and at number nine, it's San Antonio. So again, the thing about San Antonio that is interesting is that this was one of the city that a couple of years ago have mentioned as one of the cities that potentially MLS could come to, and then Austin happened. Austin really kind of damper that movement of San Antonio potentially coming to the league. I mean, if Austin didn't came into the league, I think San Antonio would be that team, that third Texas team that comes into the league. But I do still believe that there's a chance that San Antonio could get a team again. I know this goes back to talking about, well, yeah, four Texas teams seems a lot. No, it's not. I think when you look at the landscape of MLS, or just kind of geographical standpoint, Texas is a bit has some of the most population of any states in the country, and that we know in Texas there's like four big major city. We got Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and also Austin recently, with the growth that Austin has been going through for the past decades or so, and also not to mention San Antonio FC. They also have their own soccer specific stadium, and that I have a feeling that stadium could be expanded once if MLS decided to come to San Antonio. There could be a case that we could see San Antonio have some real interest. Again, this is another team that been mentioning before, and as much as with Austin coming into the league, that kind of have damper the spirit a little. But there could be a case that maybe the league might think about coming back into to the Texas landscape, and that San Antonio could actually get that next MLS team. Although again, we'll see whether or not if that is the case, because with the way that Austin have already come into the league. Then we get to number 10. Now this one, for the last one, I'm gonna throw a city that I haven't mentioned in terms of expansion, but I could definitely see it could happen. And of course, is New Orleans. And the reason why I throw them, even though I know New Orleans don't actually have a team like near the first two level of U.S. soccer, they're going to get so. The USL Championship is expected to expand to New Orleans as soon as 2025. And the reason why I put New Orleans in there is that I have a feeling that when we see some of these teams that have got expansion team in the USL Championship, they always tends to do well and draw well to a point where they can get that momentum enough to pull in maybe an investor that is interested in terms of getting that team, and then eventually push them into MLS. Because after all, when you look at some of these recent MLS expansion teams like Cincinnati, a team that recently expanded in the USL Championship, and then eventually they got themselves into MLS. Nashville is another, they're a good example, a team that recently comes into the league and expanded into to MLS, and to some extent Orlando City too, and also a lot of these expansion teams, even going as far as back to the Portland Timbers and the Seattle Sounders, two teams that play in the USL Championship, or back then it was called the A League, but it's pretty much the same as the USL Championship. They had some successful crowd, and next thing you know, MLS is definitely looking at, like, MLS really wants to pull into market that has good fan culture, and have the investor group to get into the league, and I think New Orleans could be that case. I mean, it all depends on once they do go into the league, whether the support is going to be there. Because if the support is not there, then I think this might be crazy just to put New Orleans on that list. But again, I think there could be a case, and this especially the fact that New Orleans is pretty. It's a pretty big market too. I wouldn't be surprised that in the near future, if New Orleans does do well in the USL Championship in terms of the attendance, we could be thinking about it, and there might be an investor that might make a push in terms of putting New Orleans into the league too. Now, we get to the Canadian cities, because again, as I mentioned before, as much as I know we haven't had a Canadian city that expanded into MLS since 2012, it's still interesting to kind of talk about the fact that there may still be a small possibility that MLS might be looking in the Canadian market. And again, a lot of reason why we might not see any Canadian team coming into MLS in the near future is because they already have the Canadian Premier League, and that league it seems like they already have teams that is in those market, and that I also think that the when you look at lead investor, there's unless if it's going to be like a foreign investor, I don't think there's going to be a Canadian investor that will have enough of that funds to really pay the full amount of the expansion fee that we see some of these U.S. lead investor of course has. But in case if the league decided to maybe be think about expanding to Canada for the first time since 2012, at number one, I'm gonna say Edmonton. So the reason why I say Edmonton could be that is because I remember just last year when we saw how Edmonton was actually one of the cities that Canada was chosen to play in their World Cup qualifier, and for a long time Edmonton has always been a hockey town. I mean Edmonton has been a town that is more known for their Oilers rather than any soccer team, and they have soccer team before, but it's been lowly attended. But when you see how the support was for that Canada game when they play against Mexico, where there was like 30,000 in a chilly night in Edmonton, yeah, I think there could be a possibility that we could see that. And again, I know going back to what I said about their local team not doing very well to a point where their local team actually is on hiatus right now. We're actually I'm not sure their local team still actually exists right now because of the financial difficulty that they had. I still think that Edmonton could be that team that could come into the league, and especially I feel like this is kind of a similar story to Nashville, where I think Nashville their story of coming into MLS doesn't start with their USL Championship team. It starts with them having big crowds for those Gold Cup games, and then next thing you know, they get a USL team, and then they came into the league, and I feel like that could maybe be the same thing that we could see with Edmonton. Now at number two, it's going to be Ottawa. So what's interesting about Ottawa is that Ottawa has had some interesting history in terms of being in the USL and also in the NASL. We had the Ottawa Fury play in the NASL and then in the USL Championship for a couple of years before they of course was dissolved, and now they have a new team in the Canadian Premier League that is Atletico Ottawa. But again, with that history that is in mind, I wouldn't be surprised that the league might look at the Canadian capital as one of the cities that they could expand in. I mean, again, it does have some soccer history, and that again, this is where it kind of gets difficult. Me always have to mention the fact that the only issue I think is going to be with them already having a Canadian Premier League kind of team. Maybe that won't be likely. But let's just kind of put that aside and say that if the league really is interested, say Ottawa could be a city that they might think about expanding. Then we go to number three, and I'm gonna go with Halifax. Now I know this might sound crazy because Halifax is way out there in the east. I mean, they're not even in the same time zone as most of these teams that I have mentioned. They're in the Atlantic time zone, which is like 4 hour ahead of me, and that would be kind of crazy to put a team in Halifax or that. But the reason why I say Halifax could be one of the more likely team is kind of similar to what I said about some of these expansion teams that have play well and have good attendance in the USL Championship, that have draw the eyes of the league and draw eyes of investor trying to get them into MLS. That's kind of what I said about Halifax. I mean, Halifax actually has one of the biggest attendance in the Canadian Premier League, and that it is pretty clear that the city really love their soccer, and I could see that could be where it's enough for them to get into it. Now, again, this is where we go back to the Canadian Premier League kind of discussion of the fact that, fans will be just happy the fact that they're already in the Canadian Premier League. That is the top tiers of Canada soccer. But if there is a case where I would say that in terms of fan attendance that can push the point where MLS might be seriously looking for a Canadian team coming into MLS, Halifax is definitely going to be that team that I can think that could most likely make that case. Then we go to number four, and then of course is Calgary. So again, I'm pretty much listing cities that major cities in Canada that if MLS is going to look into that is going to be expanded. That those are probably most likely that is going to be because Calgary alongside with Edmonton and Ottawa, some of the biggest city in Canada, and that there could be a case that Calgary could come, and especially their local team Calgary FC also have some decent attendance in their games. There could be some interest in Calgary too, but again, a lot of that has to do with the fact that it is a major city in Canada. And especially if they do expand those Canadian cities, I would definitely love to see Edmonton and Calgary coming to the league because we talk about the battle for Alberta in the NHL. I want to see something similar to in MLS too. I mean, that could be an interesting kind of rivalry if we have two Alberta team battling each other out in the near future. And then we go to number 5, and that of course is Hamilton. So let's put Hamilton there because mainly because I do think that if MLS could want to expand another team, it could be in the Ontario area. I mean, the Ontario area, that Toronto area, is just a hotbed in terms of Canadian soccer. Some of the most well-known Canadian players that currently plays in the Canadian national team currently comes into that Toronto area and even in the Hamilton area. And Hamilton has already have a very successful Canadian Premier League team that is Forge FC, that is also one of the more well-attended team in the CPL. So there could be some interest that we could see Hamilton getting to a team, especially also having kind of a rivalry with Toronto FC. That could be interesting to see as well. So yeah, I do think that it's worth to put them on the list. But again, let me know in the comments below. What do you think of these cities that I put here on the list? And if there's any city I didn't put here on the list that you think could be most likely coming to the league in the near future, or even maybe be the next expansion team that's coming into the league, let me know in the comments below. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys do like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.